everybody.
Hello and welcome to Under One Roof's webinar covering insurance and tenement buildings. My name is Mike Heffron, and I am the Chief Executive of Under One Roof. Now, Under One Roof, as you may know, is Scotland's only charity dedicated to supporting owners of tenement flats. So that's owner-occupiers and landlords, as well as housing professionals with repair, retrofit, and maintenance issues related to tenement buildings. We've been doing, our charity's been around for a few years now, and we have a number of services that we provide, one of which is an inquiry service. You can go on our website, underoneroof.scot, where you can find tons of information and about insurance and anything else related to owning a tenement building when it comes to organizing repairs and retrofit. We've got a dedicated section on building insurance. So as you're watching the webinar, you can have a browse through that to see if there's information there that would be helpful for you, or might even answer your question before we even get to it. One of the other things that we do are webinars such as this, free webinars that anyone can join up to get more information about the various topics that we have. We'll be doing a number of webinars coming up. You can go onto our events page and see if you'd like to find out more about some of the other topics that we cover. But without further ado, let's crack on with common building insurance. So today we are very lucky to have a couple of people that are joining us that know quite a bit on the subject of tenement maintenance, tenement repair, and insurance. So we've got Jo Perry-Geddes. Now, Jo is the director of Mill Architects. She has been an RIAS Advanced Conservation Accredited Architect for 25 years, a director since 2023 of Mill Architects, and is, as I know, working with her, a longtime advocate for addressing building repairs in tenement buildings. Welcome, Jo. And we also have Alexandra Richards. She is the development executive at Howden Insurance. And she's worked for more than 25 years of experience as private client and fine arts insurance broker in both London and Edinburgh. Alexandra specializes in evaluating, analyzing, brokering, and providing tailored insurance solutions. So welcome, Alexandra. So what the format is for today is I'm going to, in a second, turn it over to Jo, who's going to just give an sort of a overview of issues related to tenement repairs and maintenance, and touch briefly on insurance before handing it over to Alexandra, who will go into a lot more detail on the issue of building insurance and tenement buildings. After that, we'll have a little bit of reflection from myself, followed by a question and answer session. Now, there's a chat room, chat part of the webinar here. If you click on the chat, you can ask questions. You don't need to wait. There's actually a Q&A bit where you can actually add it in. That's probably the best place to pop stuff in. Rebecca, who is helping us out, our communication officer here at Under One Roof, will be putting links in based on the topics that people talk about. And also just generally keeping an eye on things. If you're having any sort of problems accessing things or need to help finding it, you can pop something into chat. If you've got a question, like I said, you don't need to wait until the Q&A ping. You're welcome to pop it in ahead of time into the Q&A box. And at the end of the session, or after the end of the presentations, Jo and Alexandra will do their best alongside myself to answer your questions. If, however, we're not able to, if we run out of time, don't worry. If you can just basically put your contact details in, and we can get back to you with an answer if we're not able to provide one today based on the details of it, or if we just run out of time. So we'll make sure that one way or another, any of the questions that any of you have, we will be able to answer. So without further ado then, I'm going to turn it over to Jo, and she's going to talk for a bit about just generally about tenement maintenance, repair, and insurance. So over to you, Jo.
Thank you.
Can we see the screen, my screen?
Yep, looking good.
Yeah, great. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. As Mike says, I've been a conservation architect for quite some time now, and I've spent quite a lot of it getting home flat owners together to form stair association groups or common stair groups to maintain and look after their properties. And that comes with its challenges, but sometimes it works, and sometimes sometimes a great repair can be done, and everyone ends the project still speaking, which is fantastic. So there's lots of problems with fabric repairs, and many of our buildings, our tenements in our cities, are in a poor and failing condition. Which we know, and it's really only when you get a stone fall or some water ingress happening in the top story flat that people are aware that actually there is a problem with their property and that they have to start looking into the condition of it or try and find a contractor to fix the problem. And if you're not, I know Mike will talk about this later, in a factored building, or if you don't have a owners association formalised, that can get really tricky and really stressful. We do separate series on fabric repair and maintenance. And to be honest, over the last probably 20 years, I've been on a bit of a roadshow of going around various cities in Scotland, trying to promote people to look after their properties so that their roofs don't look like the picture that you're seeing there. One of the reasons we're doing this webinar is because after so many years of delivering the maintenance and repair events, it became apparent that the most asked questions, certainly recently, and the most confusing answers were about insurance within tenement blocks. Myself and Jacqueline at Under One Roof did a event just before Christmas last year, and basically the entire event was all about insurance and people just being really confused. Whether you've just bought a tenement flat, have been living in one for years, have an organised stair group or not, insurance is really important to have, and no one really understands why and what type of insurance there is. And of course, there are many types of insurances that Al will tell you about. You've got your contents, your building, your joints, your block. And most commonly, I'm asked about insurance whilst carrying out fabric repair projects to a tenement block and to protect it against, obviously, fires if we're refelting a roof or using lead, which is being welded, etc. And a lot of people assume that it's maybe the contractor's insurance that will cover that as well. So there's a confusion between owner's insurance and contractor's insurance. And then when you're looking into that, you've got the problem of the rebuild value of the tenement. And of course, in every flat, there will be different insurances that will have been got at different times, and the rebuild value will, of course, vary. So it's confusing, but fear not, Alice here. She's going to sort us out and simplify it all for us. But what about the law? What does the law say? So you're obliged by law to have adequate insurance for the tenement and common parts. So that's the common parts that you share as owners together. This is to cover your share of the costs of major and expensive damage to your building. You need to insure your building for a reinstatement value that could be more than the sale value. So there's another tricky one. Many tenement and apartment blocks carry a common block insurance policy, which all owners pay for jointly. And of course, if you do that, you have to speak to your neighbours. You have to have possibly a joint bank account. And there's various other challenges that come with that. We'll try and move on to the next slide. But firstly, let's get back to basics. How do you know that you live in a tenement? It's quite obvious, I think, if you're living in a city and you're in a tenement block, of course. You're aware of that. A tenement is classed as any building divided into two or more parts horizontally. So you could be living in a villa, in a house, which is separated, and that is actually classed as a tenement if you don't owe downstairs. So back in the day, obviously we built very, very high because we had lots of stone quarries. There was a Romano-Dutch law that made it possible to purchase airspace, basically building into the sky. And because the cities were so cramped, that's exactly what all the cities in Scotland did. But of course, that came with the creation of many, many tenement buildings. So owners are jointly responsible with their co-owners to maintain the common parts of the tenement, which are those that are to provide support and shelter. So what are the different types of tenements? You've got the stone tenements and villas, mostly built before, so we call them pre-war buildings, your traditional ones that you would assume is a tenement. You've got older brick and render flats, mainly social housing, built between 1920 and 1940. You might not think that's a tenement, but it is. Of course, you might have a mixture of council or privately owned as well in there to add to the confusion of your insurance. You could live in a low-rise or a high-rise flat, mainly built by the councils in the 60s and 80s, or you can be in more modern estates built in the last 40 years. So and really, unless you're in a kind of semi-detached or detached property, you are living in a tenement and have to adhere to the laws about insurance that are relevant to that. So this is where people sometimes get confused because lack of maintenance or repair is not covered by your insurance company. And I think a lot of people feel that it is. So after a storm, if something has fallen down, it is the owner's joint responsibility to deal with that. And a lot of people think that maybe it's to do with the council or maybe it's to do with someone else. But actually, you have to maintain your property. You have an obligation under the Tenement Act to repair your property. And if something does happen and there is a storm and a chimney does fall down and it has been, poorly maintained, then the owners jointly can get sued for negligence. So it's really important that everyone understands their legal opportunities. So should your chimney fall down in a storm, but it's been poorly maintained, like the one above, or should water pour into your roof, and the roof has been neglected for many years, but there is internal damage into your property, you're not going to get insurance for that. So it's very important that you put money in the right parts of the tenement to make sure that you're protecting yourself as homeowners. If you look after your external fabric, you will not get internal defects. So I've taken this from Under One Roof because I thought it was really good, and it's important to say that Under One Roof have got an entire section on insurance, which is really clearly laid out for anyone who wants to go and have a look. But what does buildings insurance cover? A typical all risk policy will give you cover over fire, lightning, explosion, and smoke, almost acts of God, as you would say, storm damage, flood, escape of water, theft, subsidence, um, third party liability. But it doesn't protect you against looking after your actual building. And so that's really important. So people often only start to think about insurance when they have to look into doing a property repair. And then the rebuild value comes into play. And then that's where people get confused about where to start and what to do. And it's really stressful. It's really stressful sorting out a common repair project. There's mainly one proactive person that gets very stressed about it, in my experience, and one person who just refuses to do anything, which in turn creates real problem. So the insurance comes up when a fabric repair project is highlighted. But in the stress of trying to sort out your water leak or your stone fall or whatever it is that's happening and understanding the condition of the building you all jointly own, your joint insurance often falls by the wayside. So for any repair project of a small or large nature, the most important thing is to create a stair group. So this is where we would say to start off. So in Glasgow, properties are factored a lot more than in Edinburgh, and in some instances that makes things a lot easier. If you are not in a stair group, it's important that you find out who your neighbours are, who owns what flat, and what their contact details are, just as a first tip. Complications arise as owners all have different insurance companies and different types of insurance with different rebuild values. So some flats will have been valued 2 years ago, whilst others might have been valued 15 years ago. And obviously the the change in cost over the years is evident. And really, there's just a general lack of understanding as to what insurance is required for what situation. And I hope if carrying out a repair project that the contractor's insurance will cover all and sundry. So to start, to start off as a very, very basic, our tips are to find out who your neighbours are. I know that sounds obvious. It's a lot more difficult than you might think. Create a stair group owners association, which you can find details of how to do that in the Under One Roof website. There is also a parliamentary motion at the moment to legalise the creation of a stair group, which I think Mike will probably talk briefly about later on. It's important that people are aware of what's happening in that. And understand that you're all jointly responsible for insuring your tenement. And there's a real lack of understanding and appreciation with that. Speak to an insurance broker to see, the best deals that you can get as a group, if that's the way that you want to do it. And ensure that you have the correct insurance in place for differing situations. So have, as soon as a fabric repair project occurs and scaffolding goes up, you have to let your insurance know. And you have to make sure that you've got the right type of insurance to cover you as a group if you are doing these type of fabric repairs. So communication is key, and it can be a bit tricky, which is why I'm now going to pass you over to Al, because she's going to make it seem seamlessly simple, and we'll be able to explain things in more detail.
Thanks, Jo. Let's wait for some slides to come over. Right, here we go, insurance. I'm going to blow your socks off. No. So my name's Al Richards. I work for Howden Insurance Brokers here in Edinburgh. We're a global insurance broking company, but with great representation in Scotland across Edinburgh, the borders, Glasgow, Perth, Elgin and Turriff. And I've just put that picture up just to demonstrate that we don't fit kitchens. You may have heard of us as we're the principal sponsor for the men's British Lions and the women's British Lions coming up in 2027. So that was just to keep things a little bit light with a bit of fun, that first photograph there. So moving on to the topic of individual flat insurance within tenement blocks. If I just move on to the next slide, please. Rebecca, are you able to click on? Or do I have to do that? Brilliant, there we go. So I've kept it quite high level for everybody, but essentially what we're dealing with today, and Joe's touched on quite a lot of it, is individually owned flats within a tenement where there's no factor, and then individually owned flats within a tenement where there is a factor. So those are the two sort of different scenarios. And what I'm chiefly going to focus on today is the individually owned flats where there's no factor, simply because of the responsibilities and issues that are perhaps a little bit more complex than when there's a factor involved in the tenement. So as Joe's touched on, it's there. The first thing to sort of think about is, in fact, the legal obligations and your rights under the Tenement Scotland Act of 2004. So in Scotland, tenement insurance, so your individual flat insurance within a tenement, is a legal requirement under the Act. You must have buildings insurance in place for your own flat and the communal areas within that tenement. And this ensures that in the event of an insured loss, that you can contribute or be compensated for any damage to your own building, the fabric of your flat, and indeed the communal areas. So it's crucial that the individual owners within that tenement have their own buildings insurance in place to protect them against insured losses. And kind of quite a nice line again that was taken from the Under One Roof website, I think it was, that you're only really properly insured within a tenement if every other owner in the tenement also has correct insurance. So under the Act, what are your rights? You do have the legal right to ask other owners within the tenement whether they have got accurate insurance, and you can ask for a copy of their documentation to substantiate that, and that they have got correct insurance for the full reinstatement value of their individual flat and the communal areas. And you can also double check and ask whether they have paid all their premiums. whether that's monthly or in one payment. And you should do this in writing. And the owner that you've asked should do it within 14 days, or if you've been asked to do it, you should do it within 14 days. If the owner of a flat is not, or if you, if the owner is not properly insured, then that other flat owner can apply to the sheriff court. It's that serious, to force the owner to get insurance. And you should seek legal advice from a solicitor to help you do this. So I think the key sort of takeaway from this is that if you're somebody that's buying a flat in a tenement building, raise the issue of insurance early on in the procurement process of that flat. Whether it's going to be a case of you having to buy the insurance yourself because there is no factor involved, or even if there is a factor involved, find out early on what the premiums are likely to be. So it's a cost that will be attributed to you by the factor, so that you're fully aware and briefed of what your insurance policy arranged by the factor is covering you for. Equally, if you've to arrange it yourself, start that conversation early so that you can have confidence in any issues that might arise, such as the property being listed, for example, or if it's a basement flat, whether there's any issues with potential flooding, whether that's from surface water or other water courses. So yeah, let's talk about insurance nice and early. Let's not be a lastminute.com conversation, and then there's a panic trying to buy adequate insurance. Owning a flat within a tenement, or owning any property indeed, comes with responsibilities, and it is important to take those responsibilities seriously, so that you are meeting your obligations, which will allow you to be adequately protected when you need it most, i.e. when you're subject to a claim. So you also have duties under an insurance contract. As a policy holder, it is your responsibility to make sure that the amount of insurance that you're buying represents the full reinstatement value of your property. And as Joe alluded to, the reinstatement value, which is something I'll come on to in a minute, isn't what you spent on buying the property. It is not the market value. It is quite different, and there's a lot of different factors that go into it. But not only should you make sure that that reinstatement value for the buildings is correct and represents the true value or cost to rebuild the property, that is an ongoing responsibility. Insurers do help with that a little bit by index linking your building sum insured each year, but essentially every 5 years it should be reviewed. So for buildings, it's the full rebuilding cost. For communal parts as well. For your contents, it should be the cost of replacing all your items on a new for old basis, not what you bought them for 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's what it would cost to put you back in an operational way now. And for valuables and antiques and art, works of art and so on, if that's applicable, the current market value. So making sure valuations for that are up to date. So which parts of the building to insure? So within the tenement, as I say, it's your check the title deeds first and foremost. So that should give a steer. But essentially the part of the building that you're buying and the communal area, plus, that might be a responsibility for parts of the roof, include any, I'm thinking of Edinburgh in particular, steps or cellars that you maybe have shared ownership of or have access to. Sometimes in Edinburgh, for example, and in Glasgow, there are bridges that go from the pavement up to the front door. And for the stately homes that have been divided into flats, it's really important to make sure that you're ensuring your responsibility or liability for any other permanent structures within the grounds. So that might include a big wall around a wall garden, for example. It might include garages, other sort of ornamental features in the gardens, bridges over burns and so on. So really that brings me on to, so what value to insure for? And so that is, as I said, the reinstatement value, not the market valuation. And the idea being that you must take really professional advice on this from an insurer, from a valuer, sorry, from a surveyor valuer for a specific insurance reinstatement valuation. And we do see that with new properties, people using the home report, which will give obviously the mortgage market valuation report, but they do often give a reinstatement valuation as well. However, they are caveated and are usually on the low side. So they will often caveat that report by saying if it's listed or in a conservation area, they recommend you seek independent advice. Quite often the home reports are a little bit old. So if a property's been on the market for a long time, the home report might be 2 years old, for example, and building costs will have increased quite likely in that time. So the key is to take professional advice on what it would cost to reinstate your individual flat within the tenement. And there is a cost-effective way of doing that. Here at Howden, we have access to a number of insurer-approved insurance reinstatement valuers who can do desktop valuations, which keeps the cost down. So for £105, one of them starts at £105 plus VAT. They will provide a desktop valuation, reinstatement valuation for your property. And the benefit of that is that it helps you going back to your legal obligations under the Tenements Act. If another flat owner asks you to evidence how you have arrived at your reinstatement valuation, you can produce your report, which should really be valid for up to 5 years. And although Joe alluded to the fact that people in different flat owners within the property will have valuations or reinstatement valuations done at different times, if you've done it kind of within 5 years and it's been index linked by the insurer that you've been using since then, that should hold water. The only problem with desktop valuations is, and we see it a lot obviously in Edinburgh, is the listed status, and they usually have their limitations in so much as they can generally go up to grade B or category B listed, but once a building is category A listed, then it's usually a requirement that the surveyor would need to come and visit the property in person. For some desktop valuers, there are a few that will are able to do that from a desktop perspective. So what I'm saying really is take advice and seek out from a broker that can assist you with that, so that you've fulfilled your obligations as a property owner and can evidence to your other flat owners in your tenement that you have taken your due diligence and care to establish your correct reinstatement valuation, and have that conversation with the valuer. Let them know about your title deeds, let them know about what communal areas there are. They're likely to ask you in any case, but it ensures it gives you that proper rounded figure for your complete liability. There is the issue of VAT as well, which I'm not going to get into too much, but they will often give a valuation excluding and including VAT. Most commonly, a claim will be to repair rather than to reinstate. Thankfully, we don't very often see complete tenements burn in fire. It does happen, obviously, but it's more likely to be a large partial loss that will occur rather than a full total loss. And repairs are subject to VAT, whereas a full reinstatement, when it's not listed, is not. So a new build would be not subject to VAT. But again, with VAT, it's specific to person's individual circumstances as well. So it's best to take advice around that. But we would ordinarily say err on the side of caution and include VAT, just simply because you'll have that VAT cost, or the claims would have that incurred for any repair work. So moving on to why is it important to get the value for insurance right? Well, as I've alluded to fulfill your own obligations under the Tenements Act and to fulfill your obligations under an insurance contract. If an insurer, for example, establishes that you have carelessly provided untrue or misleading information, they can treat the policy as if it never existed, or they could refuse to pay any claims, or they can and just simply return the premium to you that you've paid. And importantly, when it comes to making a claim, if your reinstatement value is not correct, and it's, let's say, 50% of what it should be, if you then need to make a claim, the insurer is quite likely to say, right, well, your flat is insured for 100,000, it should be insured for 200,000. So a loss adjuster would come out, review the claim, and could establish quickly that the reinstatement value is not correct. So your escape of water claim that you've suffered, sadly, for 50,000, let's say, because you've been 50% underinsuring, they're only going to settle you for 50% of that claim. So 25,000 is what you'd get instead of 50,000 for your escape of water claim. So that's the other reason to get your reinstatement and your figure correct and your contents figure correct as well. There's no point paying for an insurance policy that's not going to properly compensate you in the event of any loss or damage because you haven't got your sums insured right. So that's why it's important to get it right. You've also got a responsibility to your mortgage lender to protect your buildings against loss or damage as well. Contents I'll touch on briefly, but as I have done already, just to make sure that these are also properly insured. Lots of people really underestimate what it costs to replace their contents at today's prices. And insurers now, in my world, which is more on the sort of mid to high net worth world, are now picking up on where there are imbalances between the buildings and the contents. So ordinarily, they'd like to see at least 10% of the building sum insured as the contents figure. These big Georgian flats, the curtains alone are going to cost, if you're at that sort of level, many thousands to replace. So when a property that might be 1.5 million to reinstate comes to us with a £50,000 worth of contents, insurers already start asking questions. And unless there is a good backstory that backs that up, like somebody has moved from a much smaller premises, they're just getting started, we can relay that to insurers and paint a picture, but ultimately they'll say to replace contents to live in, to make that flat livable in, it needs to be higher. You cannot replace all the contents in a property for that little amount. The thing with getting I was just going to touch on something briefly there with regards to flats and claims. The most common claim you're going to come across is escape of water, and likely if you've got an owner who lives above you or a tenant who lives above you, you'll probably be subject to a flood of some description that comes down into your own flat. So again, it's making sure that your contents, sum insured, are sufficient that might be damaged from that, and indeed your buildings. Although it is grating, it's you have to make the insurance claim under your own insurance policy. There's a common misconception that it's upstairs, it's their responsibility to settle the claim, it's their fault, but negligence is very difficult to prove and accidents happen, which is why you have insurance if you've got accidental damage cover. So for example, if an upstairs washing machine leaked and it's caused damage to you downstairs, that's just one of those things, and unless they've been negligent and that can be proven, that the washing machine has leaked 5 or 6 times before and nothing's ever been done about it, then yes, perhaps negligence can be proven. But if it's just a one-off, it's just one of those things. So it's to make sure, again, that your sums insured are correct to cover you in that particular circumstance. So your responsibilities as the policyholder also extend to information that you must tell insurers about throughout the duration of the insurance contract, which is for 12 months. So they're selling you insurance on the basis that it's being used as your home, unless of course we're dealing with property owners where the flat is let, but let's park that for the time being, working on the basis that you are the homeowner. If your home is likely to become unoccupied, that is something you must tell insurers about because they'll change their terms. If there is a change of the use or the occupancy of your residence, such as you may then decide to let it or have Airbnb, or you might decide to have a lodger, that is a material information and you must let your insurers know about it. If you've been the subject of any bankruptcy, CCJs or IVAs, anybody who's insured under the policy, again, you must let your insurer know about that throughout the 12-month policy period. If you're going to do building works, which I'll come on to in a minute, again, you must let your insurers know. Any changes to security or fire protection arrangements, any criminal offences, any deterioration of your buildings, these are all key things that you should let your insurers know about, and it's in the first few pages of most policy wordings. There'll be a section about changes to your risk that you must tell insurers about as and when they occur. If you don't, it may affect any claims payment or could result in your insurance being invalidated. So that's something else really important. Your duties under an insurance contract and the changes you need to tell an insurer about are detailed towards the beginning of your policy wording. I appreciate policy wordings can be very lengthy, and it's not everybody's bedtime reading topic, but if you only just read the first sort of few sections before you get into the actual depths of the cover for the individual sections, that ensures that you, again, are taking sort of your insurance contract seriously. It's a legal document at the end of the day. So renovations, which is something obviously Jo touches on and is very much her area, and building works and repair and maintenance and so on. But insurance is not a maintenance contract. Again, you have an obligation under your insurance policy to ensure that you take reasonable care and due diligence with regards to protecting your property. Insurers are not there just to pick up the slack because something's got damp or gutters got full of grass and it's leaked in and so on. You have a duty to look after your property, and the insurance is only there to pick up in the event of an insured peril, which would be storm, flood, fire, escape of water, accidental damage, and so on. Doing any renovation or building works, you should let your insurer know before that happens. So just thinking about individual flats, if you're doing any works within that, it's very difficult to be very specific on this because so many different insurance policies have different limits. But ordinarily, a sort of a more standard online mass market product would probably have a building works limit of 10 or 20,000 within it, which so it gives you a bit of room to do bathroom or kitchen, renovations, for example. And all that means is that the insurer is okay for you to do those renovation works, in that they will continue to insure the home whilst that's ongoing. They're not if from flood, escape of water, fire, and so on. They're not insuring any liability from the contractor at all. They're simply saying that's fine. We recognise you might do some painting, decorating, and we're happy for that to happen within that first 10, 20, whatever it is, limit that's within the policy. So it's always a good idea to let your insurers know. If it's going to be anything more substantial than that, definitely let them know, and at which point they may come off cover altogether and you'll need a specialist renovations insurance product, or they'll apply certain terms and conditions to the policy. Again, it depends on whether you're going to be moving out or staying in there. When it comes to an insurance claim against communal areas, then which have been damaged as a result of fire, let's say, that's a slightly different situation, and we're then into the realms of quite likely a loss assessor being appointed, who will act on behalf of all the individual owners of the tenement block to pull all the various different insurance policies together. If your neighbour, for example, is undergoing renovation works that may have an impact on you, again, just let your insurers know. The key is communication and just being aware of what your responsibilities within the policy are. If communal areas are being worked on for the sake of repair, let your insurer know. Just if there's scaffolding that's going up, for instance, and what the nature of the works are being done, just so that they are aware of it. So if there is heat work going on in the communal areas that could potentially start a fire, they might put a restriction on the policy for that. But yeah, it's just communication is key, and I can't really be more specific than that because each individual case is on its own merit. So in conclusion, with just mindful of the time, the sort of key takeaways I think are that you have obligations to fulfill from both the Tenements Act and from an insurance contract, from your own insurance contracts perspective. get a professional reinstatement valuation done. They don't necessarily have to be very expensive if you can go down the desktop valuation route, and be wary of any reinstatement valuations put on home reports. They can be very on the light side. Be aware of your duties under your insurance contract and what changes you need to let an insurer know about, as I said earlier, usually at the beginning of the policy wording. And then you can feel comfortable that you have fulfilled your duties. Good risk management. So look after the property. Communication with your other flat owners is key. Keep those repairs going. Look after your property. You have a duty to do so. And the insurance is not a maintenance contract. Bear that in mind. The first slide actually that Joe had a picture of gutter with lots of grass coming out of it, which then usually results in backed up water coming into the property and creating a damp issue. That's a classic case of making sure the property is maintained. And if you use a broker, we have lots of articles that help about how you protect your property in the winter, what to look out for if you're going away, and all that kind of thing. But communication is key, as within all these things, and speak to and get to know, or not necessarily get to know, but keep a professional relationship with your other owners within the tenement, so that you can do the best that you can to adequately protect it. That's it.
Great, thanks, Al. No, that's fantastic. Joe, we'll bring Joe back in there, and there's a slide there if you had got any questions or wanted to get in touch with Howden. Yeah, no, it was just a couple things that I wanted just to touch upon, and then we've got some great questions in here that really cover a broad range of the topics. But just a couple of things that sort of struck me was one on the issue of owners associations and the importance of having an owners association. So you can form an owners association now. I know Joe had mentioned that there's some legislation coming through, but you can form an owners association now. The difficulty and why there's some legislation coming through that's going to basically, in our hope, make it so every building has an owners association is the issue around incorporation, and you can still get block policies. As a general rule, I know there's a question in here, and we'll touch upon it. As a general rule, you can get block insurance policies, even though owners associations can't not without an extreme amount of difficulty, incorporate. It's easier when it comes to block policies rather than individual policies you can do yourself, but block policies ensuring that everybody in the building has the correct amount of insurance and reinstatement value. You can the easiest way to do that is to, if your building is factored. Basically, oftentimes factors will be the ones that sort of organize the insurance policies through that. There is also some talk about making block insurance mandatory for all tenement buildings. That's something that really needs to happen alongside with owners associations being something that every building has. You can't really have, in my opinion, one without the other. You need all the owners to be talking to each other before you can organize a block policy for very obvious reasons, because you would need to get lots of information from all of the different owners. So that's something that struck me as something that Alexander, that you mentioned too, and it's something certainly we get inquiries about quite a bit, is around the issue of the upstairs flat. There's a leak, and it's damaged my property. So obviously it's the upstairs owner that needs to file a claim to pay for the repairs that were needed for my flat. And I think that was we get a lot of those kinds of questions with people getting frustrated with that. And it was very, very interesting to hear that unless you can prove negligence, and something this has repeatedly happened, and oftentimes it is. We've gotten certainly cases of that. But unless you can prove that, if it's just it happened once where there was a broken pipe or something like that, and that you're going to have to file the insurance claim on your with your insurance provider to fix that. It's not something that you're going to be able to do. So I thought that was quite informative as well.
Yeah. So if you're the one that's suffered the damage, then it's for you to submit the claim. And if there's negligence, or if the insurers feel they can subrogate against where that came from, then they will do so. And then if it needs to go to to solicitors to thrash out the negligence side of things. If that can be proven, then that's that. But for you to get on and get some sort of financial compensation, you have to make the claim under your own insurance policy if you've suffered the damage.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you had mentioned too that just briefly before we get on to the questions, you had mentioned too sort of about a loss adjuster having to sort of get all the different claims together. And I assume a loss adjuster is going to get involved in a case where there's been a fire and there's been damage to multiple, for example, a fire, where there's been damage to multiple flats. And one of the, I assume that is correct. But also, yeah.
So usually where there's multiple flats affected, each insurer for each of the individual flats would appoint a loss adjuster.
Okay.
But usually there would then those adjusters would come together and probably appoint an overall adjuster to act on behalf of everybody to try and keep it simple. With the individual interest still, because different policies, different limits, different types of cover, and so on. So it's a hugely complex situation.
Yeah. And made even more complex, and this is something that we've done some work on too over the years, is if one of those buildings is underinsured or not insured. And that just slows the process down. And you've got potentially owners that have had to decant, particularly if it's fire or serious water damage. And it absolutely slows everything down because first of all, you've just got the time of working with multiple insurance companies if you've got individual policies in each one of those flats. So this is one of the benefits of having a block policy, of course, if that's possible, is that you've got one insurance company that's covering all, rather than potentially 9 or more insurance companies that are talking to each other and then having to deal with the fact that one of those flats was underinsured or not insured at all. Yeah. So it's another example of why it's important to have insurance and have it the correct amount. So let's go on some of the questions here. Just a couple of quick ones. I touched on the Owners Association to apply for common building insurance issue, but one of the questions that came in from Paul, and again touched on this a bit, but I've attempted to find communal insurance. Broker I contacted stated that our block group was not a limited organization, i.e. incorporated. The insurance would have to be in the name of all individual owners. Is that a common practice? Al, is that something that you can address? Not maybe this specific issue, but just generally, is it going to be an issue?
It's about who's got the insurable interest and who a claims payment can be made to, and that generally is just the one entity. So if you're able to say to form some sort of residential association, which you may have done because you may have common repairs and things like that you have a bank account for, so you have the residential association of XYZ tenement, then that would be the insured entity, and insurers are happy with that, and they can note the individual interests of the current owners on the policy to reflect that. So it means that in the event of any loss or damage claim occurring, the payment would be made to the residential association of, and then they would instruct the repairs to be done, and the claims payment would be made to that entity. It's not that common that I've seen for a block policy to be in, let's say 6 or 8 different insured names, simply because, again, those people could move out and then they've forgotten to tell us that they've sold their individual flat, and so they're no longer, and the new one hasn't gone on, and then you haven't got the right insured entities on the policy, you haven't got the right insurable interest on there. So and a claims payment, you can't make a claims payment to all of those individuals because it might be that not necessarily all of them have been affected by it. So it needs to be one overall, generally speaking, needs to be one overall entity that's insured.
And and the specific question here is that I think the problem that they encountered was the insurance company said that common entity, the Owners Association, the Residents Association, needed to be incorporated. Now, is that from your experience a common practice, or would that be do you think that might be a bit of an outlier, given that Owners Association, it's very difficult to incorporate? Now, that is one of the things that's going to come in potentially with the legislation, is allowing that sort of ability to have a limited or incorporated sort of status. But
No, I mean,
Yeah.
I've come across that with, for example, a few stately homes that are divided up into flats, and they have a residential association with a constitution and so on, and that's considered fine. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily incorporated,
Yep.
but it has, as say, it's registered as a has its own registered bank account, and there it goes back to my point about claims payments being made. So whether that's going to change or not, or I'd have to take that away to absolutely double check that. But in experience that I've had, it doesn't necessarily need to be the case.
It may be, Paul, that you need to, it might be just checking in with, is shopping around a little bit. That broker may have just had the wrong information on that particular element. Certainly, I am aware of owners associations that are not factored that would be able to have block policies. It's difficult, but it's possible to do. It's a little bit, I mean, when I say it's difficult, it's more difficult if you don't have a factor, because the factor, of course, is paid. That's what you're paying your fee for, is for them to do that kind of work. But
buying a block policy as a residential association, owners association, is really difficult. Really difficult. I mean, we could do another whole separate webinar on that and the problems with it, because everybody's got different. Especially if it's something that you're coming to a bit later on and everybody's had their own insurance policies, and then you have tried to put in place a common one, it goes back to the point of communication and everybody having different budgets. It might be that suddenly to arrange a block policy, it's more expensive, which could be for any reason because the reinstatement valuation is now correct, whereas before you as an individual might have not have been insuring it correctly. And it's just there's quite often just difficulties between individual flat owners and coming to any sort of a agreement on that, and it's usually because the premium is maybe more expensive than if they were doing it when it was individual. Individuals will still be responsible for doing their own contents insurance, so the block policy wouldn't pick that up. It's premiums, it's as an insurer would charge just one premium, and then it's up to them how they split that. And again, that can create issues, because if someone's got a much smaller flat than somebody else, how do you split it? Do you split it by square footage, or how do you do it? But that's not for the insurers to decide, that's for the residents to decide themselves, the owners, and that can cause issues as well. So it's not straightforward by any means, and quite often when we have inquiries from owners associations for exactly that, it ends up we issue a quote and it doesn't go anywhere else because they can't agree on how to move it forward.
Yep. No, that is one of the many examples you will get with the difficulties of trying to do common works of any sort, whether they're actual works or common agreement among owners on any various things. So we've got a lot of information on our website on how to both form owners associations, but also set up a structure that allows for clarity on a lot of these issues around sort of responsibilities, and also just working through problems that you might have. And it's something that we'll definitely be hearing more and more about in the coming months and years when it comes to owners associations and the issues around block insurance and such like that. It's, again, it's one reason why that's a very clear reason why it's oftentimes factored buildings that have the block policies rather than individuals. Doesn't mean that it can't be done, but block and factors are used to doing that. And so have the ability much easier to manage those things because they will have multiple properties that have those kinds of insurance policy. Thanks for that, Paul. So Anna had a question here. What if there is a fear from owners that bringing in a building insurer would result in a full tenement review and a demand that the work that is more of a nice to have, in quotes, is a condition of the insurance rather than essential, such as roof repairs and maintenance? So Al, is there something you could touch upon that? I mean, I've got some thoughts too, but.
Usually, when an insurer comes in to do a survey of a property, it'll be for reinstatement reasons, and then they may comment on other aspects such as security and intruder, depending on whether we're dealing with a block policy or whether we're dealing on individual things. The requirements that they usually make are usually in relation to the security of fire protections, that kind of thing, and rather than the sort of general condition of the policy of the building. If they feel that the building, like for example, we have some clients who might have structures in the exterior which are in a complete derelict state, so they'll just exclude cover from them, or they may just restrict the cover to that, to fire, lightning, explosion, and aircraft, for example. So they might make restrictions, but I haven't seen survey reports where they would say that XYZ has got to be, full roof has got to be redone. I mean, obviously if this roof's in a complete state of disrepair, they would probably take a view on whether they want to insure it at all in any case. So it's a bit difficult to comment without knowing exactly the full extent of what condition, but yeah,
So
the situation is in.
If an insurance company is going in and they're largely looking at the reinstatement value. However, part of what we had talked about was the insurance company being able to show the insurance company that that there weren't defects, that there weren't sort of like the building wasn't sort of, there wasn't deterioration. Is bringing in a surveyor to do just a full building survey to identify what are the things that need to be done now, what are the things that need to be done in over the next 5 years and stuff like that, making sure that you're dealing with all of the sort of the red light issues, the stuff that needs to be done now. Is that going to help as far as sort of the process down the road when you say, for example, you need to put in a claim and a common area of the building, you can show that a survey was done in the recent time, we addressed the issue, or the surveyor said this part of the building is fine. Is that something that is going to help the process? Of course, it's expensive to do a survey, but we encourage people to do surveys every 5 years. But
yeah, I think demonstrating any sort of good risk management like that, even if it's a rolling program. So, like, for example, you might not be able to do all of it at once if a survey flagged up some key issues, but you can say that you're taking one step at a time and addressing those over a 3, 5, whatever it is, period to try and maintain the property to the best of everyone's ability and budget, for the communal areas in particular. And I mean, every property, right, has its kind of, not every very few properties are completely perfect. So
yeah,
it's just the nature of the weather and
sure.
having a property ownership that that it's an ongoing thing, and some pointing that needs doing, or chimneys that need redoing, as long as it's kind of if then a chimney is, because we touched on chimneys earlier, is subject to a claim because it's been damaged in high winds, let's say, in a storm, but that it was in a state of disrepair or it was deteriorating, then the insurers will just adjust their payment for that accordingly. So because they're not going to, their position is to put it back in as you were immediately prior to the loss. They're not there to do betterment.
Joe, this might be something also to bring you in on the and maybe just touch, if you can, on the importance of getting those inspections.
I mean, I suppose
every 5 years.
It all ties in, doesn't it? So, as part of the parliamentary motions that myself and Mike have been involved in, one of them is to do quinquennial inspections to your tenement blocks every 5 years. And in essence, what you're doing is a dilapidation survey of your block. So you're showing the conditions of your chimneys, you're showing the conditions of your downpipes, your slating, all sorts. And one of the reasons it's so important, regardless really of whether your insurance will pay out for your chimney that was about to fall down anyway, is this whole problem of if fabric does fall on passers-by, users of the building, whatever, and hurts them or hurts a member of public or damages a car, you as the owners are, you're responsible for that. And I think there's a real lack of understanding of that. Your insurance isn't going to save you if something like that happens. And so it really does come down to due diligence. And I bang my drum with this, if you're going to buy a tenement block, a tenement flat within a block that may or may not be listed, you are buying an old building that has to be regularly maintained. And if you don't have the money to do it, then don't buy a historical building. Go and buy something else. But you have to, as part of the report, that, as Al says, can be demonstrated that you are doing due diligence in terms of understanding the condition of your property. And also, it may also help with a claim. But it's just the whole starting point of the whole thing, Mike, really, isn't it? Is know
Yeah.
know what's going on.
No, and it was touched upon earlier too about being very wary of home reports, and we can't stress that enough. Home
Oh, we don't like
reports.
home reports.
We
Yeah, we
don't
don't
like
like
home
home
reports.
reports.
If you're in a tenement flat, home reports
No,
have many benefits, but one thing
they
home
just drive by.
reports,
They just drive
yeah,
by.
home reports do not do is give an accurate assessment of the condition of the building. There is a section for it. It will be a surveyor that is looking at it from the street. Now, that might work if you've got a detached or semi-detached home, and they can actually, because they can actually get around it. If you're in an old stone tenement building that goes up three
You need to go up
stories or
on the roof,
something,
you know, you need to do a
yeah.
drone survey, you need to literally climb onto the flat roof, you
So,
know. Now, I understand that people who own flats don't want to do that, but you know, people like me will do that, you know. So there are people
yeah,
out there who know what they're looking for and know how to help. And you know, it doesn't have to be the end of the world. You know, as Al says, most buildings have got problems, but you phase it, you traffic light it, you do it in sections.
yeah, no, and I think that's the thing is that you bring in a surveyor, they're going to be able to look at elements of the building that somebody who's standing on the street and just filling out the report for
Mm-hmm.
the home report is
Mm-hmm.
not going to see. They're going
And
to
it's
get
important to
aerial
note,
shots
Mike,
of
as
it. So,
well,
yeah,
that for people who are kind of looking for architects or surveyors, you've got the RIS website, which has got conservation accredited architects. That's where you want to go, or the RICS, which has got accredited surveyors. So they're the websites that you want to go to find the right professional in your area.
yep. No, that's absolutely right. I've got a couple more questions here, so we're just getting close to time, but we'll definitely be able to get to these, I think. One is from Marion. So we've got a block policy arranged through a factor. It's in a few parts here, but it's quite interesting. I took a look at this earlier. We've got a block policy arranged through a factor. Developer purchased a flat in the block. They knocked down a wall. When they did so, that resulted in structural damage to other flats for about 50 grand's worth. Now, the insurance has declined the claim due to defective workmanship. Developer subcontractor was not insured. And the factor is not helping as it's not part of the common area. What are your options? I mean, from looking at this straight from our perspective, I think what you're looking at is you're looking at speaking to a solicitor and you're trying to get that money back from the developer themselves because they would have needed to have insurance that they did not apparently have, rather than the factor will be, I mean, the factor's role in this is managing your insurance. They're not the ones that decide whether or not the money is paid out. If you think that the factor does have a responsibility that they are not living up to, there are options to go through their complaints process. If that's not successful, then you can take the next step of taking them to the first tier tribunal. I won't go into the details of that due to time, but we have an extensive section on our website about how to manage the first tier tribunal when taking, if you believe that the factor has not lived up to their responsibilities as laid out in their written statement of service. So I would recommend you take a look at that to go through that option. But it would seem to me that the option that you're talking about, as far as sort of claiming the money back, will be from taking the developer to court. It's interesting that the factor is when they said that the factor is not helping as it's not a common area. Not yeah, we might need a little bit more digging in that. Al, do you have anything to sort of add to that? So
Yeah, it goes back to the point I made about material risk changes, and building works is a key one. So the block policy arranged by the factor will have in it that you need to let the insurer know if there's any building works going on. So the developer should have let the factor know that they were going to be doing building work, so that conversation could have happened with the insurer about whether any terms need to apply, whether a specialist renovate, depending on what the contract value or whatever it was that they were doing to the flat, how expensive that was and so on, whether a specialist kind of more renovations policy would have need to have been put in place, which would cover the existing structure and the contractual risk part, and whether the factor has made it clear to the individual flat owners of their responsibilities under the block insurance policy, that they do need to let the factor and insurer know of any works that they're likely to undertake. So again, that's a messaging and communication thing, that seemingly people didn't know what their responsibilities were to the insurance contract, and that any changes like that, or if a flat, as I said, is going to become, you decide as an owner that you're going to let the flat, now you need to let the, whether it's a block policy or an individual policy, you need to let the insurer know about the change in circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, it very well could be that the developer, the person that knocked down this thing, was not acting honestly. So,
and it's regardless of
yeah.
whether it's in the communal areas or not. The bot policy covers the entire structure, or individual flats and the communal areas. So it's regardless of whether it's affecting the communal areas or not, I would say.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, and Marion, I'm sure that this is probably not any new information, but yeah, and it's going to be expensive, but probably you're at a point where you're both talking to a solicitor, but also take a look at what the factor's responsibilities are. Look at your written statement of service, which they are required to provide to you, and if you believe that they are not living up to the responsibilities laid out in the written statement of service, you go through their complaints policy first. If you're still not happy with the result, then you can take the issue to the first-tier tribunal. First-tier tribunal is something that you do not need a solicitor to. You can do this yourself. It's sort of one of those sort of situations where it's set up along those lines, so you can that you don't need to hire a solicitor to be able to take them through that. But take a look at the stuff on our website, both about raising legal action and also factors and complaints, and hopefully that'll provide you a little bit more support and information. We've got one more here from Deborah, which is, what if the factor has a block policy in place that covers all the flats, but allows an owner to opt out and insure their property themselves? Effectively, the owner is double insured, though only really paying for one. Which insurer would pay out if a claim is made?
It's a very good question. So yeah, as I say, there's double insurance because you can't exclude that particular one flat from an overall block policy. And usually what insurers would do, it would be one that would pay out, and if there was a dispute, then there might be an equal payment. But I think it would have to say that which is the lead insurer, essentially. So if the individual's taken out themselves, they'd probably call on that one initially, and then the block policy thereafter, I would imagine. But I'd have to double check that.
Okay, great. Is that something that you could follow up with us on? Al? That'd be great. So Deborah, if you want to just
I've not heard of the ability to opt out, so I'll double check with our property division on that, and I'll get back to you, Mike.
That's great. Okay. Deborah, yeah, you can just, maybe what you could do is just drop us, you go onto the website and just drop us a message through the Ask an Expert box, which is in the upper right-hand corner. Just mention that this issue, we've got our education and training officers that'll be seeing these our inquiries. There are here today, actually. So they'll be able to follow up with Alan, and we'll get something back to you as best we can. Finally, I think what we'll do is we'll wrap up here. We've got a question from Stephen, which is basically just a general question, is that somebody's had a bad experience with factors. Where would you go to find reliable, accredited factors? So there's an umbrella organization, Stephen, called TPI Scotland. It's the Property Institute Scotland, which is sort of the umbrella organization for accredited factors in Scotland. And there you'll be able to find a list of different factors that are members, and I would recommend that you take a look at the factors that are on there. Everybody's has different experiences with factors. Oftentimes we get lots of questions about factoring, and we also get lots of inquiries from factors. We have a lot of factors, particularly TPI Scotland. Accredited factors will often come to our webinars and be using our information as well, because we also provide support for housing professionals as well, as far as how to interpret various elements of the Tenement Act and such. So I would recommend that as a starting point. But as a secondary thing to follow up, I think what you want to do is you want to ask around. And find, it's the same thing with doing building works. If there's a contractor that you're looking for, a good contractor, look for scaffolding and then clap a door or two and find out what people think of the work that that contractor is doing. If you see scaffolding on, on your street, somebody's working on a tenement building. I think the same thing. Use networks, use social networks in your community. Talk to friends, talk to people in other buildings to find out what their experiences with their factor has been. One of the things that's important with factoring too, when you're taking a look at factors, is that there's somewhat of a misconception about the role of factors. So there are, of course, factors that are not living up to their responsibilities, but it's also owners have an obligation to really take a look at what factors are actually responsible for and what they're not responsible for. Ultimately, the factors are directed by the owners. And so again, having an owners association, particularly for in a factored building, is incredibly important because it makes communications a lot easier with your factor. They have one point of contact rather than trying to contact everyone. And you can have a much better line of communication, but you're ultimately going to be directing your factor as far as what various elements of the issues that we're talking about today. So take a look at that written statement of service. Take a look at our webpage. We've got extensive pages on our website about factoring, how to get the best out of them, how to hold them account when they drop the ball, and how to change them when you've reached the end of the line. And we can also, as always, answer any questions that you might have through our inquiry service. So I think we'll wrap up with that today. If there are any questions that have come in, we got one just really quickly in from Marina on the problem with the title deeds detailing different responsibilities for each flat owner in common areas. Marina, what I'll do is I think just to answer that quickly, if you've got discrepancies within your title deeds, those are the title deeds are the first place you go to identify what parts of the building are common and which are not. Also, who has responsibility, what parts, which owners have responsibility for those, and various elements. Sometimes they mandate insurance and such. If those title deeds in your building are different, you need to refer to the Tenement Act 2004. Again, we've got a lot of stuff on our website around that about what the Tenement Act says. And if you've got a specific question on that, after you've taken a look at our website and taken a look at the section on title deeds, and we call that unworkable title deeds. Those are title deeds where there are multiple title deeds that say different things, or it may be that all of your title deeds say that there are 8 flats when actually somebody split a flat back in 1937 and there's actually 9 flats, so the maths don't add up. Those are unworkable title deeds, and that is when you refer to the Tenement Act 2004. We've got plenty of information on that, but we also have the inquiry service. You're welcome to drop us a question, the specific question you might have about how to deal with such situations, and we'll get some more information back to you as best we can. We'll call it a day here. We could keep talking for a while. I know this has been extremely helpful. Every time I do this webinar, we've done few of these webinars on insurance. We've gotten fantastic questions. We did today. We've gotten some really great information. So thanks again, Joe and Al, for everything that you've done to provide information and to support people through this very tricky process. We'll be back. We'll do these again. And like I said, if you have continuing questions about this, please get in touch. Please pass on our information. We're a charity that is there to help you. We get support from Scottish Government. We get support from local authorities and private foundations to help you to work through these issues. So please use these resources. And if you have any questions, please get in touch. But just to wrap up for that, on behalf of Joe, Al, and the team at Under One Roof, I'd like to thank you all for taking part, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.